We are voting for a mayor who has no contestant, by the way. We're voting for city councilors at large, and we are voting for some district city councilors. And I hear music. And so we're asking everybody to come out and vote because it's important. The only time your vote don't count is when you don't cast it. And it's very interesting this year that we have a mayor who is not being challenged. And it's just, it's strange. It's really strange because she did have an opponent and he decided to drop out for whatever reasons. But so now we have an uncontested mayor's race. We still should go to the polls because we do have some at-large city councilors that are running, and they do have some opponents, as well as District 7, District 5, District 4. They're all, I believe, are being contested. So this is this is very things that are happening in our country are very disturbing. Things that are happening in the city are disturbing. We look at Franklin Park, and we look at all these D restrictions, and it's not a happy sight. They are talking about canceling our snaps. I know a lot of nonprofits their funds have been either reduced or taken away permanently, and so what are we going to do, people? What we need to do is come together. There's a shutdown. I believe the shutdown has been 30 days now. The government has been shut down for 30 days. That means people are not working, or if they are working, they're not getting paid. And it's thousands. This has affected hundreds of thousands of people over these United States. And so my guest, Minister Randy Muhammad, is going to be in a couple of minutes. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some other stuff too. But what say you, Boston? How do you feel this morning, knowing that Tuesday is an election day and that we will be going to the polls again? It seems like people forget that we have an election every year. On the odd years, it's a city council race. And on the even years, it's the state race. So here we are again, almost November 1st. And I see my extinguished guest has arrived. Good morning, Minister.
Good morning, Priscilla. How are you?
I'm good, and you? Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Yes, so I was just giving them a little preview, that we are in an election year, and we have an election on Tuesday. And we have election with city councilors at large and city councilors a district. And we also have an uncontested mayor's race. Our mayor's running uncontested. And so let's talk about that. How does that feel? That the mayor does not have an opponent, that she just gets to glide back into office?
Yeah, well, we have to, first of all, Priscilla, thank you for having me on the show. Pleasure and an honor to have an opportunity to speak to your audience on these issues. I heard you as I was walking in talking about the importance of us uniting and organizing. And I think that the fact that the mayor is running uncontested, is indicative of a bunch of things, right? And part of that is our inability to really come together and organize. For years, the black vote has been fragmented in this city. And we really, every time an election season comes, politicians come before us
Mm-hmm.
and they make certain concessions, certain promises
Mm-hmm.
to certain individuals who support the campaign and end up pushing the agenda of this one or that one
Mm-hmm.
because it suits their personal narrative, and that's how we end up in a situation like we're in now,
Mm-hmm.
because our vote was divided
Yeah.
between the candidates that we thought were viable, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That split the black vote. But what is needed is that we have to develop a black agenda
Mm-hmm.
so that any would-be politician that comes before us that wants our vote, whether that's a mayoral candidate, whether that's a city councilor, state rep, or what have you, we can put before them the black agenda. And we can see if they are willing to back the black agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And if they back the agenda, not our personal interest,
Mm-hmm.
but an agenda that's in the best interest of the collective, then we could support that kind of a candidate, and then we have to hold them accountable. And so I think that the absence of an organized, structured black agenda that speaks to the demands and the will of the masses of the people in Boston
Mm-hmm.
allows us to continue to be utilized, marginalized
That's right.
in these elections. We have to realize and recognize that in our unity, there's power.
That's right.
And that's been one of the things that we've been advocating for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
This year we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the Million Man March.
Mm-hmm. 30 years.
30
That's
years.
a long time.
And to me, it feels like yesterday,
Yeah.
but it was a long time ago.
Right, right.
But it was, the largest mass gathering
Mm-hmm.
of people in one particular place.
Right.
When I think about the No King's Day rallies that took place, this past last week, I believe it was,
Mm-hmm.
they said that they drew over 7 million people
Mm-hmm.
all over the country,
Mm-hmm.
in various rallies, which included New York, Boston, D.C., L.A., all over the place. They were rallying, and collectively
Mm-hmm.
they drew 7 million, with all of the anger and all of the dissatisfaction that folks are having with government right now and policies coming from the White House. With all of the visceral anger, 7 million people took to the streets to voice their disappointment.
Mm-hmm.
When we compare and contrast that with 1995, we had 1.8 million black men,
Mm-hmm.
not all over the country,
Mm-hmm.
but in one place,
Right.
in Washington, D.C., for the purpose of atonement, reconciliation, and to take responsibility to make our communities safe and decent places to live. One of the agendas from the Million Man March was voter registration and political activism.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but one of the main things that we have to have, the Million Man March was effective and successful because it was the unity of
people.
all of our people.
Right.
And we came together across all denominational lines, whether we were Christians or Muslims,
Mm-hmm.
whether we were, Bloods or Crips,
Mm-hmm.
whether we were college educated or in the streets, whether we was from the black nationalists, whether we were civil rights icons and activists. It was the first time that the full spectrum of the black experience in America really came together, young and old, north and south, east and west, and we came together, and it was that unity that made that day so impactful. But it wasn't just that day.
Right.
Contrary to popular belief, folks want to, kind of with this revisionist history, try to erase the Million Man March out of the pages of history, or act as if though it was just a feel-good day. That's not what it was.
Right, right.
That
There were a lot of
event-
changes made after the Million Man March. You want to talk about that?
Absolutely.
Some of the things.
Well, a lot of that day and the events of that day really changed the narrative of Black America, and it changed the pendulum of what was taking place in our communities in the late 80s and early 90s, which was fratricide on a scale that we haven't witnessed before nor since, right? That was the height of the crack epidemic, and that was the height of gang warfare, and the murder rates were through the roof in every major city. And so since the Million Man March in 1995, you could look at the statistics, the murder rate in every major city dropped, particularly among young people. The violence had dropped. In 1990, I think, was the year that had the highest murder rate in the city of Boston, and it was 143 homicides in 1990. And then if you look at last year, there was, I think they recorded 25 homicides. And so the murder rate dropped significantly since 1995, and in truth, they have never gone back to prior to 1995. But not only that, there was over 1 million Black registered voters that entered into the political system, and the Black vote has really swayed it and influenced practically every election since then. But I just want to come back to what you was talking about in Boston. We have to recognize the importance of our unity and coming together proactively. I think a lot of times in Boston, what I've seen is we've always come to the table, late, right? When it's election season, and then, we're scrambling, where we have to be more proactive in coming together in developing an agenda that's an ongoing agenda that we would have, but it's going to require us coming together, not just to get the vote out, because around this time everybody want to get the vote out. We want to rally and get everybody.
We should start doing that in January.
We have to start.
Year round. It should be a year round. That should be something that we all, those of us that work in civic engagement and work with youth, we should be doing that in the beginning of the year, not in the summertime. It just doesn't make any sense. We know we have an election every year. Every year we have an election. So why aren't we preparing in January? Like, we know that this election is going to happen. So in January, when everybody is sworn in, that's when we need to be on these people that get elected and be like, yeah, remember when you said this? Remember when you said that? We shouldn't be afraid to speak to these politicians.
That's right.
We should come up with a way that, because I believe a lot of people really don't know or don't care about the elections because they feel like their vote don't count.
That's a fact. And, it's upon us. And I want to say that there's been several efforts to try to organize our people, right, and to develop this Black agenda, starting from the LOC, which was the organization that actually organized and mobilized to bring thousands of Black men to Washington, D.C., and every city had a LOC, and we had a strong local organizing committee in Boston that consisted of members of all different faith traditions and various community organizations. We came together to plan to mobilize Black men to get them to D.C. But after the Million Man March, we were instructed to keep the LOCs together and intact, but again, I think one of the things that I want to share with our people to consider is too many times we're reactionary, right? So it's easy. We'll come together for an event, but we'll fall off.
Or if something tragic happens.
A tragedy happens, we'll respond.
Right.
And we all fired up.
Yeah.
But after it dies down, it's not in the news, we don't show up to the meetings. We don't want to keep coming out. We don't want to keep organizing until there's another major event. And then we scrambling and saying what we're not doing. So there was some that came together and continued to plan under the local organizing committee. You were a part of that. There was a few things that we had done, with regards to voting and different issues that came up during that time, and then it died down. Right. And then, it was you, Sister Priscilla, and I thank you for wanting to reignite that energy, and you came, and I remember you sat with me and pleaded, we got to do something. And we talked about reigniting it, and we did under the block.
Yes, Black Local Organizing Committee.
That's right. So the block was formulated, right? So it's
Right.
the Black Local Organizing Committee, and that name change actually came from the committee,
Right.
Which goes to show when you participate in these organizations, you have a voice. We can
Right.
talk about it.
Right.
It's not my way or the highway.
That's right.
Right.
That's
It's not one person's perspective. We're gonna sit down and talk about what's in the best interest. So, the group wanted to be more specific than just the local organizing committee. They wanted to focus on black, on the black community. So we formulated the block, the Black Local Organizing Committee. Salute to Brother Wawa, who's still
Yes.
holding it down.
He sure is.
But there was a few of us that came together and began to do that work. And now the current iteration, we have the Black Agenda Coalition, right? That's also coming together to develop the Black Agenda. So really, I would like to direct folks to the Black Agenda Coalition if you want to follow through with what we're talking about, right? And not just complain, or if you actually want to be a part of the solution. And I'm not talking about just for next Tuesday.
Right.
Because that's the thing. We just chasing the next election.
Right.
Like if next year is not going to happen.
Exactly.
Right? We have to start planning long term, 3 year,
right.
5 year,
Yes.
10 year, 15 year, 20-year plan.
Right.
Because a lot of urban developers and folks that are designing what's happening in our city,
Yep.
a lot of these plans have been put into motion, and they've been drawn up
That's
10,
right.
15, 20, 30 years ago.
That's right.
And this
That's
is
right.
why we feel like we just getting bulldozed, and why are they putting bike lanes everywhere, and why are they
Gentrification is
crazy.
crazy.
That thing, they didn't just
Yeah.
they didn't just think about that yesterday.
That's right.
Right?
That's
These were things that were thought about and planned strategically at least 10, 15, if not 20 and more years ago, and they have put the infrastructure in place to bring it into reality. Even when we look at, the changes that's taking place from up top, in the White House, that did not just happen. Project 2025 was written way before 2025. Right? So just as we see the opposition, they plan on our community for 10, 15, 20 years. We as a people, we have to get to that point where we're coming together and having these think tanks and having these organizations that can actually develop an agenda on what we want to see for our community 10, 15, 20 years down the road. And we have to have the ability to come together and stay together to bring it into reality. But if we get sensationalized by one event or one election and we get fired up, but we're not really planning, we're not organizing, we'll continue to be behind the cue ball.
That's so true. Organize. That's what it's about. And unfortunately, we have to do that. We have to stay together as a community, as a people, because we can see what's going on. It's right in front of our face. You go down to Nubian Square and you see they're just building up there. They're just building.
Exactly.
All the Mass and Cass has moved to Nubian, to Grove Hall, to Ashmont Station, all these places. And we know that eventually there ain't gonna be no black people in Boston. If this keeps continuing, we have to put a stop to it. We have to say, listen, we're not gonna allow you just to come in here and bulldoze us and bamboozle us and trick us.
Absolutely.
That's where us coming together and working together comes in that. For some reason, we as black people, we don't seem like we don't want to work together, or we want to, everybody want to be a chief, but nobody don't want to be no Indians, everybody want to be a chef, but we don't have no cooks. So the thing about it is that this is 2025. They already been doing Imagine 2030. Okay,
That's
so
right.
So
That's how far they plan in
Yes.
advance, and so you 100% correct. The bottom line is we have to be organized, and we got to stop planning, right? Because it's really not a joke. We see that there is a plan to really eliminate us, right? Not only from Boston, but really from the country. Like, there's a move to get rid of us. And in truth, that was part of the reason for the Million Man March, right? This plan was developed back then. One of the things that the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was telling us back in the 90s was that they were going to use gangs, guns, and drugs as a pretext to come into the black communities with the National Guards and the military with the intent of wiping us out wholesale. So this is serious. When we see
this is what's happening now.
We see it happening now. Now, he told us this 30 years ago.
Right.
And so in truth, the spirit of the Million Man March and the change in the tide and how black men came back to their community and began to squash their beef and began to take responsibilities and change the tide, that actually pushed back their agenda, or it frustrated their agenda, right? But now we see that they're at a point, because they're looking at the browning of America. They're looking at blacks becoming the majority in America, or they're looking at white people becoming a minority. I'll say it that way. And the reason why I make that distinction is because when we say black in the Nation of Islam, we mean all members of the original people, right? We're talking about those of our so-called Latino family. When we utilize the terminology black in the Nation of Islam, we're talking about the black, brown, red, and yellow, all members of the indigenous people. But I know a lot of us don't see it that way. But the enemy sees it that way.
Right.
And we thought they was just going to be targeting our Hispanic people. But now we see that they've been targeting us. And we've been the target all along.
Right.
However, so I understand when I say black what I mean. But I know that most folks don't see it that way. So I use the reverse. What those who are racist and in power are concerned that white people are becoming a minority. And they're becoming a minority because of, foundational black Americans or black people, but also Latinos and also Asians and also immigrants that are coming in from different parts of the country, Indian, Asian folks, right? Collectively, when you look at, African Americans and Latinos from the different countries that they're coming from, and you look at, Asians, whether they're coming from, China, or they coming from India and other parts of the world, the bottom line is they are not white, but white people are becoming a minority, and this is what is frightening them and is forcing them to these extreme cases, right, where we are now, where, they really want this confrontation. And we see it happening, right? But as the minister said, they want an excuse to wipe us out wholesale. Don't think that this is not in their mind when they come into our communities in full military gear and harassing people. They're hoping that someone would respond and retaliate to give them the justification to wipe us out.
Well, I mean, it just seems like it's been going on for a long time, the way they're shooting and killing us, you you look at George Floyd, you look at Breonna Taylor, you look at all these people who have been shot by the police and killed, and not persecuted. Nobody's been prosecuted except for the George Foreman guy. But the bottom line is that this is what they do. They pit us against each other. Like when these immigrants, for lack of a better word, when they come into our country from Africa or from the islands, they tell them, "Oh, don't deal with them black Americans because they're lazy, they're thieves, they're this, they're that, So they come, and when they come together. They stick together. It seems like us black Americans are the only ones that don't stick together.
Yeah.
And that's sad because, like my saying, we are the people, we have the power,
That's right.
And we just have to embrace that, get that, we can make changes,
Absolutely.
Who would have ever thought that someone like Minister Louis Farrakhan can bring 1.8 million people together,
Right.
black people,
Right.
And then turn their turn their lives around, because that's literally what happened. Minister Farrakhan told them to go back and adopt someone in prison,
Yeah.
adopt
Babies.
children,
Oh,
you
yeah.
know, and to work among ourselves, because when you think about it, our ancestors, that's what they had to do. I don't think I could have been a slave.
Right.
If I was born in that era, and I was in the kitchen cooking, oh, somebody would have got poisoned. I was serious. because,
Well, sis, it's interesting because I hear you. In a way, right? We've been brought back to that, and they're gradually bringing us back to that slave existence
yeah.
and reality, because we don't own anything, right? We're still subject to our former slave masters, who really control most of the wealth, the property, the businesses, so forth and so on. So we are almost in that position now, and we have a large population that is literally languishing in the modern day slave plantations of the criminal justice system.
That's right.
Right? So when you look at our incarcerated folks, that's a form of slavery. Remember that, the
13th Amendment.
the amendment to the Constitution that abolished slavery, the 13th Amendment, right, said that slavery or involuntary servitude will not be allowed in the United States except as punishment for crime. So there was a loophole in the 13th Amendment that allowed them to re-enslave us if we were classified as criminals.
Right.
And so then they began to criminalize aspects of black life to justify in incarcerating us and locking us up. So slavery continued in this country after the Civil War through sharecropping and convict leasing, right, and mass incarceration, which we have till this day. And so we see now that there's a move to further criminalize our lives. The current administration is talking about criminalizing homelessness, right? And so, we're moving into that direction. Was there a call?
I think we have. Good morning, caller. You're on the air.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm not necessarily sure if the minister would agree with me on this, but it seems to me that there seems to be a little bit of revisionist history going on. Back during the 90s, in the perceived black community, the biggest threat was an internal one from a black gentleman who not only was a very large drug dealer, but also claimed a relationship with the Islam Nation. Is the minister familiar with who I'm talking about?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Are you talking about here in Boston in particular?
Yes, Dorchester. He had a club, social club on Geneva Ave, and he took over a project.
No, I know who you're talking about. You're talking about our brothers that came from New York that were operating out of the Orchard Park housing projects and had the property over there on Geneva Ave. Yes, he's a member or was a member or is a member of the Nation of Gods and Earths, which is really part of the 5% Nation of Islam. That's kind of an offshoot, if you will, of the Nation of Islam, but they started their own organization called the Nation of Gods and Earths, and that's who you're talking about. But yes, what is continue with your point?
Well, it seems to me that all the factions have to do is supply the black community with the means, and the black community tends to destroy itself. I'm not necessarily sure how that, other than them saying, okay, we'll give you the guns and we'll give you the drugs. Why is it that we have an issue with destroying ourselves?
Yes, that's a very good question, my brother. Thank you for asking that question. The reality is that we as black people in America have been totally destroyed, robbed of our real names, language, culture, God, religion, and history. And so we have been destroyed. We've been deprived of the knowledge of ourselves. And so in that condition, we act other than ourselves. And the enemy who puts us in this condition and deprive us of having this knowledge of self that'll give us self-esteem, self-respect, and dignity, and also give us an opportunity to see ourselves doing something great. We have a lot of great leaders, inventors, organizers, right, that have done great things. We come from a great people that built civilizations, but our people are not taught that. And so in the absence of the knowledge of self and being made ignorant, and we think about, there's a documentary out. It's called The Bastards of the Party. It says the Bloods and the Crips, the Bastards of the Party. And you think about the gangs and the Bloods and the Crips and the drug era that you're talking about that we saw in the 80s into the 90s. The documentary, The Bastards of the Party, talk about how these organizations sprung up in the wake of the government assassinating black leaders, right? So we see our government assassinated Dr. Martin Luther King. They assassinated Malcolm X. They assassinated Bunchy Carter of the Black Panthers, Fred Hampton, right? They assassinated so many of our leaders that were trying to organize our people, educate our people, right? And so in the wake of all of the political assassinations that was led by our government against legitimate black leadership, the young people grew up in a vacuum of that leadership. Mm-hmm. And that's where the government was behind bringing the crack into the black communities, as we know is a fact today. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan was telling us this in the 80s and the 90s, but it came out in 1995. Journalist Gary Webb from the San Mercury News he was an investigative journalist, and he uncovered that it was the CIA that was actually responsible for bringing the crack cocaine into the black community, and they was funneling it through people like Freeway Ricky Ross, who was bringing in the crack through the Bloods and the Crips in LA. But the Freeway Ricky Ross was just one of many. There was drug kingpins in New York, drug kingpins in Boston, in Detroit, right? And all of these big drug kingpins that we look at from the 80s and the 90s that, gained legendary status in the black community. But behind these black faces, and you talk about the brothers that came behind the brothers that we seen as big drug kingpin, unbeknownst to them, their plug, their connection, their supplier was CIA agents. And this reality has been documented in a documentary called Kill the Messenger, which talks about the Gary Webb story, and also in a TV series, I forget which streaming service it's on, but it's called Snowfall, which talk about the Ricky Ross story. So yes, brother, you're right. We have participated, members of our own community, sold drugs and devastated our community. And gangs devastated our community. We don't deny that fact. We know that exists. The spirit of the Million Man March was the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan educating our young people as to how they were being set up for slaughter and destruction. And he called us to atone for what we were doing. And many of the black men actually came and did atone for destroying their community. They did atone for selling the drugs in the community. They did atone for the gang violence. Matter of fact, I witnessed Bloods and Crips, have gang truce and tie their blood and red rag together and commit to come back and change what they were doing, which is why we seen the tide change and the violence drop. So yes, we can look at the brothers that were bringing the poison in, but I would ask you and I would encourage us, we do have to take responsibility for that, but let us not negate the oppressor that orchestrated the circumstances by which we can be in poverty and then set us up by bringing these drugs in and giving us access to high-powered weaponry that black men were never allowed to have weapons. If you think about the Black Panthers from the late 60s to the early 70s, these were black men, some law school students, educated, who were advocating that black men and women utilize a Second Amendment right to bear arms to defend their community. There's nothing wrong with that. That was legal. They were advocating for legal gun ownership to defend their communities. If you look at the Black Panther footage, they were carrying shotguns. They were carrying little 38 revolvers, handguns, right? And the government went crazy.
Not to mention carbine rifles.
Say that again?
Not to mention carbine rifles.
Yes. And the government went crazy to wipe them out just for having these handguns and advocating the Second Amendment. So we went from them destroying the Black Panther Party in the 70s to in the 80s giving young black boys Uzis, Mac 10s, and all of these sophisticated military grade weapons, right? How do we square that hole? It's because they knew that they already eliminated the leadership that was guiding our people to clean up our community, like the Panthers, and food programs, and defend your community, and the Nation of Islam, and brothers like Malcolm X, of course, and even our brothers in the civil rights movement that were being a beautiful example of virtue and fighting the system in a way that was non-violent, but
with all due respect, there's a couple of things that I would take issue with. One of them is, in fact, I know we're not talking about that, but the assassination of Malcolm X and the comments that were made from the nation later in life that are well known and can be found on YouTube and many other streaming services as to who was the actual orchestrator of the demise of Malcolm X.
Can you say that again? I missed that. Can you say that again? I'm sorry, I missed what you said.
I said I would take issue with the cause of the assassination of Malcolm X, based on statements made by members of the nation themselves, which can be verified and found on YouTube and different things if you type in who killed or who orchestrated Malcolm X's mind. But that aside, there's still an issue concerning the fact that with all of these different things, the black race still seems to be the one that cannot get together and work together, where every other nation that's come into this country seems to find a way to thrive, but we still seem to be fighting ourselves. It's the crab mentality.
Yeah, I agree, my brother. I agree, and I think that statement that you just made highlights that. I think it's very well documented that the FBI and the CIA were involved in orchestrating the events of the assassination of Malcolm X. We have Malcolm X's daughters that are actually actively right now engaged in a lawsuit against the New York Police Department and the FBI for being involved in conspiracy to assassinate their father. This is actually happening now. We've seen that several folks have come forward who were undercover agents that were part of Malcolm's organization, and some that were part of the Nation of Islam. So again, I think that crab in the barrel mentality and that divisiveness that you're talking about, you're actually highlighting by insinuating that it was the Nation of Islam that was behind the assassination of Malcolm X. That is an old, worn-out trope that really carries no water. As we was talking about the Million Man March, we know that Dr. Betty Shabazz, the wife of Malcolm X, actually was one of the speakers at the Million Man March, and they, resolved their differences. There were differences there that were exacerbated by the government through the infiltrators that were part of not only the Nation of Islam, but also Malcolm's organization. So, that is a chapter that we have gotten by. And again, when we look at where the current reality is right now and the information that is coming forward, is irrefutable information that the FBI, the New York Police Department, were absolutely involved in setting and organizing the events of that day. So but for us to keep bringing something like that up that clearly is divisive to our community, when that's a chapter that we've gone beyond and that we're bringing people together, that really that doesn't serve any purpose but to divide our community. It is a fact through the counterintelligence program of the FBI, the FBI counterintelligence program that they ran all up through the 60s, that their main objective was to prevent the rise of a messiah that would organize and unify the black masses. And so part of their counterintelligence program was the utilizations of agent provocateurs and stew pigeons to sow misinformation and disinformation to neutralize these groups.
Well, and I appreciate what you said. I will clearly do more research on the things that you were speaking of. And if I'm wrong, or if my just suppositions have been proven false, I will publicly announce that. But getting back to where we're at now, where the unity within I recall when I first moved up here that the Grove Hall area was safe, sacred, and I was actually told that that was an area that was controlled by the different mosques that were there, and nonsense did not go on there, period. Don't go down there acting a fool with the exact words that I said back in the day. This would be back in the late 70s, early 80s. Where is that type of leadership today?
It's still here. Mosque number 11 has been a part of the revitalization of Grove Hall. If you've lived in Boston since the 70s, you go to Grove Hall, you know that it looks totally different than what it looked like before. The culture is different now. It ain't all the way, perfect and clean, but there is a difference, and we're still there. We're still present, engage in our community every day, and so
Torchlight Recovery.
Yeah, we have Torchlight Recovery, which is there now providing services to our community, those that are seeking recovery. But we've been leading efforts with the 10,000 Fearless Peacemakers who are patrolling that area and working with our young people and engaging in, gang conflict mediation. And again, we got to look at the actual facts, right? When you talk about, I just gave it to you a little bit, in 1990, there was 143 homicides. We only had 25 last year. So, it's easy for folks to try to see and say, well, what are y'all doing now? Well, don't you see what we're doing now? Mm-hmm. The murder rate ain't what it was. So even though it's not perfect, it's definitely better than what it was. And, I've been leading the charge personally, inviting other black men to join the efforts with us. The 10,000 Fearless Peacemakers is not a Nation of Islam exclusive organization. You, sir, could be a part of the 10,000. So don't, just ask, what are y'all doing? The question is, what are you doing? What are we doing collectively? We don't...
Collectively, what am I doing personally, I think, is well known and well documented, so we won't do that. However...
Can you identify who we speaking with? Because I don't know who you are.
This is Pastor Dan Walker.
Pastor who?
I hold a...
Dan Walker.
Daniel Walker.
Mm-hmm.
I pastor a small church in Framingham, Mass.
In Framingham.
And yeah, I'm known for live concerts. When we held I'm known for different events, like when the young person lost their life down at the school down there. We held a vigil on the steps. I'm known for organizing things of that nature. So would you declare that Grove Hall is safe?
Grove Hall is safer than it's been in many, many years. again, the statistics speak for itself. Do we have work to do? We say the biggest room in the house, the biggest room in anybody's house is the room for improvement. But we are actively engaged. You'll find us every day out there engaging our people. Not just when there's a sensational homicide. We're in the streets every day, beloved. And we're inviting our brothers and sisters to join us in this work. The reality is that, too often, is not enough of us, and oftentimes it's just us, right? And from the beginning of this show, I've been talking about the 30th anniversary of the Million Man March, which was an inclusive operation which brought us together across denominational lines, organizational lines. We had to do it together. So I've been pushing unity since I got on this platform, and this is what I'm encouraging our people to do. I think that we can do a better job at coming together collectively to be proactive in solving a lot of the issues that lead to the hopelessness and the despair that causes the violence or the now we're looking at drug use and abuse that is happening in our communities. That's a byproduct of failed systems that we have to come together proactively to address.
Well, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and I appreciate what you've said. As I said, I will continue to do my research on where I may or may not be lacking.
Yes, sir.
But at some point, it would be lovely to have a conversation with you. I'm also a broadcaster on Boston Phase Radio. I have a show called Sound Fathers every Wednesday morning. Lately, we've been dealing with a lot of biblical issues. But at some point, it would be nice to sit and talk with you or members of your community.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you for calling, and thank you for your questions. Again, there's things that our people don't know because, there's a interest in our story not getting out, and so the fact that you asked those questions because you didn't know, I don't take offense to, and so it gives me an opportunity to give you and provide you the answers. So I would have no problem to having a further dialogue with you so that we can look at some of these things and get a better understanding. Because again, if we don't know our history, then how can we properly chart a course for our future? How can we understand our present if we don't understand
if we don't know our history?
Exactly.
That's
yes, sir.
Simple.
That's right.
Well, thank you for indulging this call and the way that you handled that. I appreciate it. You have a great day, sir.
You too.
Thank you, Pastor Dan, for calling in. Appreciate it. And I was just told we have like 3 minutes left.
Yes, sir.
We didn't even get
ma'am.
a chance to talk about Iliad Rashad, but who was here this weekend. But we're going to work something out that we can have him come on and talk about the UFOs and the UAPs, the research that he's been doing, and the fact that the Nation of Islam have been talking about UFOs since 1930, and nobody has reached out to them to find the truth or to ask. So
Yes.
definitely want to get him on. I know he lives in New Orleans, so we're
we
gonna
can
maybe
get him
do
to
a
call in.
calling.
We get
Yes.
him to call in. That's a very deep subject, sis. In the closing, I know we got to close, but usually when people talk about UFOs, they link it with conspiracy theories or weirdos, right? And there's been a psyop for many years from the government to pretty much elicit that response. But we see that there's a disclosure movement now, and they can no longer continue with trying to deny or ridicule the reality of the existence of what they are now. They don't call them UFOs no more. They call them UAPs, which is unidentified anomalous phenomenon. A phenomenon is something that exists, that is real, that is observable. And these anomalies are things that are taking place that they can't explain. So the government is bearing witness that there is something factually out there. There's something that we just don't know what it is. And we in the Nation of Islam have been taught what those things are. We've been taught about them and been teaching about them even before the terminology UFO became part of the United States lexicon. So we could talk about that.
Yeah, definitely. Are we out of time? Okay, so I want to thank you, Minister Randy, for coming on today, gracing our station with your presence, and I just really appreciate you. I really do. I've been around you for quite a long time now.
Yes, ma'am. We've been working together for a while.
Yes, and I'm happy to work with you and to be in orientation at the Nation of Islam.
Thank you.
So
Pleasure.
I appreciate it. Definitely appreciate you all supporting my event last week, 2 weeks ago now. But all praises due to Allah, and we'll be back here next